So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for returning at such good pace from your coffee break, and it's a delight to open this second plenary session on the theme towards a new era of technology sharing. I was delighted to see Thomas Pojar, National Security Advisor of the Czech Republic here, with whom I had a conversation at 9 a.m. on the 4th of October 2023 that led exactly 13 months later to the IISS being able to execute this important event here in the Czech Republic. Delighted to welcome on the stage Major General Stephen Butto, who's got the Space Portfolio Director and Military Deputy role at the DIU in the U.S. Department of Defense. If anyone hasn't here read it, they should read the DIUX book written by Christopher Kirchhoff and Raj Shah that describes how then Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, a great friend of the IISS, decided that it was important to get Silicon Valley more directly connected to the defense procurement establishment, and gave $30 million to a group of people to begin working with the single bureaucratic advantage that they reported directly to the Secretary of Defense. Now it's in the billion-dollar range and doing important things, and one of the big questions I think that we have before us is the way in which Silicon Valley will continue to connect itself umbilically to defense procurement systems, not only of the US but of other countries. And really happy also to have with us Major General Chris Barry, the Director of Land Warfare of the British Army, who tests and validates equipment in the field. He's just done so in Kenya and returned from Kenya to be with us today. And also joining us will be Katerina Chernomurenko, the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine for Digital Development, Digital Transformation and Digitalization. We have a very strict rule at the IISS that no one can speak at the IISS without being physically present. Like all rules, we have an exception for people speaking from an undisclosed location in a war zone. We first exercised that exception 2 years ago at the Shangri-La Dialogue when President Zelensky addressed us in June 2022 from somewhere near Kyiv. We were delighted that he was able to be with us in person this year in June, but things have gotten understandably fraught again in Ukraine, and Katerina will join us at approximately 11:15 and deliver her remarks then. But to get us going right now, Major General Stephen Butto, that podium is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At the beginning of World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was quoted as saying that powerful enemies must be outfought and outproduced. And especially with respect to the latter, many of the comments and observations I'm going to share with you are really focused at just that. So our challenge, the other thing I'm going to do is reinforce a lot of excellent remarks and observations made by my peers in uniform from the previous panel. So our challenge today, of course, as we're addressing the most immediate threat posed by Russia and its aggression towards Ukraine, but much larger than that is this observation that we're in a renewed era of great power competition marked by the rise of China and a growing collaboration with other autocracies, including Iran, North Korea, and others. And so collectively, this needs to be in the backdrop of everything that we do together, especially with our engagements with our commercial industry. DIU's mission is really to accelerate the adoption of commercial technology, and it's been that way. A year ago, we modified it to add a suffix that says that we accelerate the adoption of commercial technology at speed and scale. At speed is really in a proactive versus a reactive way, and also to make sure that we're adopting technology at the speed of relevance. And I'll talk about this more in just a moment. Equally important, and it was highlighted by one of the questions from the audience yesterday, is we must do so at scale, and massive scale. And scale means production. And production does not always align with exquisite things. So in our Department of Defense and many of the other defense agencies and departments around the globe, we have an affection for exquisite capabilities that are disruptive and asymmetric, but they do not scale. And for great power competition, we must have capabilities that scale and scale at mass. So let me talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. First, one more observation is that in great power competition, we must use all instruments of national power, and we must do so in a very wise and pragmatic way. The military, great militaries require two things. They require great economies, and they also require great technological capabilities or advantage in the industrial base. And these things all must work in concert with one another. Commercial companies, by and large, especially technology ones, do not develop for a domestic market. They develop for global markets. We must take the same approach with our friendly allied military capabilities and reduce the barriers that keep us from doing so. Our goal is to create asymmetric advantage. And in order to do that, we must break away from conventional norms, mostly on the long road of how we develop government bespoke technology or how we acquire these things. We must be focused on not just buying products that are hardware focused, but how do we buy software? Where can we buy services? In the rapidly changing environment of artificial intelligence, if you spend $1 billion for a GPU stack today, it will be obsolete in 2 years. So how do we get better buying power with the dollars that we have for national security and defense? Most importantly is we have another instrument of our collective power, and that's talent, the people. So I would say that one of the things that we are here to do, and we're working in concert with the European Command and with NATO, is DIU. We're putting people at the point of need, and we're looking for extraordinary talent across all of our allies, and because it's the talent that fuels the technology and the innovation. So in terms of technology sharing, it's governed by three things: law, policy, and culture. Law. We have to be willing to go to our legislators and explore how to get relief from laws that were enacted long ago for a different environment. And one of those has to address ITAR. We cannot have commercial companies that are based in Europe that are unable to talk with their counterparts in the United States because of ITAR. Policy. Policy in the context of an innovator should be managed by exceptions. If we're unable to write exceptions to policy, then we must change the policy. And one of the key policies that we've changed in the US is to move from one of augmentation to integration of commercial capabilities. On the culture, we have to be able to train and incentivize people to do the right thing for this right environment. There's 3 tiers of innovation. The first one is quality, and our ability to mass produce things in large numbers. It requires low risk taking, but the benefit is that we deliver the quantities of items that we need at scale at the point of need. The second tier is agility, and the agility is often achieved through software-defined capabilities today. But we have to incrementally improve and be committed to improving these capabilities in real time. The third tier of innovation is disruption. And this is really where a lot of the focus with small startups and companies is truly focused, because they can take the most risk, and because they benefit largely from that reward. However, we have to not try to innovate within the architecture of which we're doing the production and the agile improvement, because it just does not work. In closing, because I'm looking at the time, the arsenal of democracy, it served a fantastic benefit for the alliance in World War II. We must revisit what that looks like for today's modern era, and how do we use that effectively for deterrence, and also to win decisively if forced to fight. Our industrial capacity must be truly assessed, and we have to be willing to use companies that are outside of the defense domain. I'm a proud owner and driver of a BMW. My first BMW was made in Germany, shipped overseas. My second BMW was made in South Carolina. I can't tell the difference between the two. If we can't just produce our weapons and defense capabilities on a single continent and export everywhere. We have to look, and our commercial sector knows how to do this. We just only have to get out of the way and let them do it. So most importantly, classification. We have to design and build things to the lowest classification level of the war fighters who are the intended audience. And in NATO, that might be NATO secret or NATO releasable CUI. Interoperability has been talked about, and we can do that at that first tier by having standards and ways that we can use modularity so that we can carry different weapon systems on different weapon systems. UX UI, these things have to be intuitive. The military today, largely between the ages of 18 and 24, 60% of our military forces, they were all born in this century. We need to give them capabilities that they know how to use and are intuitive to them. And lastly, I'll just say that we have to have a balanced portfolio between the exquisite capabilities that we get from our traditional vendors and a large amount of capability that we get from non-traditional vendors and that can be shared not just within the alliance, but with regional partners, including Ukraine and others around the world who will be equally under the threat of these autocracies. So thank you very much.
General Bhutto, thank you very much. And one fact that I think underscores one of the arguments you made is that the commercially available NVIDIA chip is 800 times faster than the processor in the most advanced Lockheed Martin F-35 jet. I hasten to add, not the fault of Lockheed Martin, but of the way in which technologies are approved by the DoD and the Pentagon and can't then be revised, as the British Army likes to say, at the speed of relevance. The floor is yours, Chris Barry. Thank you very much.
My dear friends, good morning. My name's Chris Barry and I am the British Army's training officer, and I'm also a late replacement, and I feel a little bit like David Baddy coming on the pitch to replace Karl-Heinz Rummenigge. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, it is a very competent but average English footballer replacing one of the giants of the game. And I do want to apologise for not being in uniform. I've just been in Kenya seeing our 4th Brigade, so the choice of dress options was some pretty muddy combats. I'll come back to that. My sports kit or this suit. Like other speakers, I do not believe that the lessons from Ukraine reveal a transformation in the way that we will fight. I believe the capabilities are additive, not revolutionary, and consequently, how we are going to prepare is a combination of what we used to do plus what will come next. And this isn't just from Ukraine, but if you look at Gaza, Lebanon, South Sudan, or other conflict areas in the world, this ability to add, at the speed of relevance, new technology onto the way that we prosecute the combined arms maneuver battle requires our ability to train. And that is what I'm going to talk about. And whilst that document that the IISS have produced is brilliant, you have to go to page 87 before you see any meaningful conversation about how we are going to train this stuff. And ever since David met Goliath, a better trained can defeat a bigger, better armed adversary. But training is not easy. And of all the things that we have taken out of our orbit over the last 20 years, our ability to train in the way that we will fight, I think, is possibly our greatest weakness. So let's consider how we might prepare for the 21st century combined arms battle. Where are we going to do this? On what training area exists? They are microscopic across Europe, and in the way that technology is dispersing our ability to prosecute the battle, that problem is exponentially greater when it comes to weapon ranges, when it comes to signature, when it comes to dispersal, and then rapid concentration at the moment of effect. Secondly, how are we going to train? So the easy answer, is this a live? Is this a virtual? Is this a live virtual constructed? And these things matter because whilst there are some brilliant simulations out there, what they do not do is represent the jeopardy of battle, nor do they allow us to consume the stock on which industry is reliant to make a sustainable business model in the supply of munitions and equipments. And these are important considerations if we are to build a defence architecture that can properly take down our adversary. And then we might need to consider who do we need to train. We have very small regular forces, exquisitely trained, potentially, but what about the reserve, and where is the mass in the 21st century combined arms battle? And furthermore, are we to skill everybody as if they're a 16-and-a-half-year-old from Rotherham, or are we going to take advantage of the enormous KSE that is in our young people today? Does every individual who will prosecute that battle need to be able to get over an obstacle course? I would suggest not, and I think the evidence from Ukraine begins to show us why. So let's see where we are in terms of developing that training architecture. So at the moment, we have a legacy training model from a different era. So whereas the NATO plan, and that is a big step forward, but it still concentrates on organising training for corps within a multi-corps setup, and it leaves the training of the bits beyond that to national responsibility. But of course, we don't have the divisions that we used to have. So let's look at this as a boxer. So we can train a brain. I'm pretty confident about that. We might be able to train the fists, the bits of brigade. We might be able to train the feet, the logistics endeavour. But where is the neural network? Where is the spine? Where are those vertical competencies that define success in the 21st century combined arms battle? Where does that get done? And at the moment, that is a gaping hole in our training architecture, and one that we need to address. What are the competent parts of a credible training model? So the first is it must be focused against the threat. We used to say train hard, fight easy. I don't know if that's necessarily true in my experience, but nonetheless, training hard does allow you to fight easier, and you must train against the most dangerous course of action. We must train the NATO plan such that we are familiar with where we will be in our battle positions on the day of conflict. Our training must be measurable. We must work out if we are getting better or if we are getting weaker. It must be tough. It must drive and deliver that resilience that is required to prosecute and to sustain and to survive in the battle. If you have not seen the BBC documentary Enemy in the Woods, I suggest that you do. And if we think that young people cannot do this, I don't buy it. There is a tablet in the desert that's 4,500 years old in Syria that says the next generation do not make good soldiers. That is not the evidence of what I have just seen in Kenya. Our training must be scalable. It must be able to be delivered within existing resource, and then it must be able to be delivered as a full-fat mission rehearsal exercise to deter the enemy if they are pushing the boundary of threat, as our previous speakers said. And it must be sustainable. It must drive industry, and it must drive the adaptation of technology. So what we train with must be provided for by industry without the frictions of the current process, so that it can be quickly given into the hands of our soldiers who have the ability as digital natives to be able to onboard this equipment faster and faster, and yet at the moment we do not pay enough, we do not give them the credit to do that. So in conclusion, I think I will just leave you with a vignette, and it comes from Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. The first place he ends up is Lilliput. He is a giant, he swims to the shore, and yet very quickly he is taken down by a number of 15 centimetre high individuals. Okay, so that could be us. If we trained properly together, there is no giant that we couldn't defeat. Thank you very much indeed.
General Barry, thank you very much for those remarks, and especially your focus on training. I must say it's a delight that you found our mention of training on page 87, because I presume it meant that you read the first 86 pages and kept on going after that. But I do recall that when the British Army was trying to integrate more cyber warriors into the MOD, they quickly realized that they needed to find people who, yes, had a rucksack with a laptop in it, but couldn't necessarily do more than one press up on any given day. And so we do need to look at the variety of skills needed. It's now a delight for me to introduce the Deputy Minister of Defense for Ukraine for Digital Development, Digital Transformation and Digitalization, Deputy Minister Katrina. The floor is yours.
Thank you, dear colleagues. It is an honor to address you today at the Prague Defense Summit. We thank you for your continuous support to Ukraine. Your help is invaluable to us. Nowadays, we find ourselves in a time that technology and innovation are critical to defending not just Ukraine, but the democratic principles we all hold dear. To stand strong, we need to stand together and reinforce each other in every possible way. And sharing knowledge and expertise is one of the top priorities in our way to victory. Today, we see Russia, North Korea, and others sharing technologies with one another, which strengthens their armies. Technologies have become a new currency you can buy anything with, especially when we are talking about weapon technologies. In order to build a strong and safe Europe, we call on the tech industry to unite in the face of Russian aggression. Ukraine is ready to contribute to this new era of technology sharing. There our experience, insights, and innovations can serve our allies just as much as they serve us. We believe it is not even a choice, but the only way to strengthen our joint defense capability. Now I will talk about how the Ministry of Defense's digital team is leveraging digitalization to overcome both internal and external military challenges. We face two huge problems, like two goals. The first is Russia's bigger army on the battlefield. The second is a large amount of paperwork, the paper army that slows down our soldiers. We believe that technology can strengthen us in both fields. We launch three main products which change the whole military world in Ukraine. First, there's Army Plus, an app that supports our soldiers. Then there's Delta, which digitalizes combat processes and helps us defeat the enemy. Finally, there's Reserve Plus, which will make recruiting easy and clear, will digitalize all military records. I want to tell you more about each of the products. First of all, Army Plus. It is a whole ecosystem of services designed to support soldiers in every way. We studied the problems and found the reports are a major issue. Now, the app allows reports that won't get lost and don't need to be rewritten. We are already seeing results. Service members have submitted more than 15,000 reports online directly from the field. We also created a unique military ID number for each service member. This allows them to send reports securely without sharing confidential information. For the first time in Ukraine's history, the government is asking service members for their opinions and feedback. Because of the results of our first survey, we launched online training within the app in October. Soldiers asked us about the course of unmanned systems, and now they are able to learn more about it directly on their phones. We understood what the military needs: automation to defeat the enemy quickly and create a fast kill chain. So we launched our next product, Delta. It is a unique Ukrainian combat system that integrates tools for military operations, including situational awareness, digital map, streaming, operational planning modules, enemy drone identification, and a lot more. Imagine Google Maps, but instead of streets, you see enemy trench lines. Instead of a market for a cafe, you see a Russian tank. It includes a separate service for streaming from drones and cameras. There is a secure chat that artillerymen and drone operators, all verified users, can meet and plan operations. It also has secure cloud storage for files. Thanks to Delta, our defenders have contributed to the largest military operations and inflicted more than $15 billion in losses of Russian forces, destroying more than 600,000 enemy objects. Delta has already proved to be compatible with different NATO systems. Moreover, we have exciting solutions like the Avengers platform, which our partners are already pricing. We have unique experience using AI to destroy enemy targets, and we plan to scale this up, and I'm sure you will hear about it soon. One more digital tool, Reserve Plus, is already transforming the conscription process. In just 2 months, more than 3.4 million individuals updated their conscription data through Reserve Plus, compared 1.6 million who updated theirs at physical centers since the start of the full-scale invasion. We have now also launched a feature for individual job matching the alliance conscripts with roles suited to the backgrounds and expertise, strengthening our military capabilities. Today, Ukraine is the place where new battlefield technologies and military services are born and where the future weaponry is being shaped, especially in the drone sphere. Ukraine's drone industry has a unique opportunity to work hand in hand with our military units, continuously developing and testing new technological solutions. Now, Russia's development to deployment cycle is around 40 days, which is enough to implement countermeasures to Ukraine new technologies. Thus, the key to real innovation lies in shortening the cycle from idea to implementation and becoming faster than the enemy. In just 1.5 months, it's easy to fall behind even for those here in Ukraine. Foreign manufacturers who don't have direct access to our soldiers' critical feedback face an even greater challenge, lacking an understanding of the context of the battlefield, trends in the development of enemy technologies, the range of exciting solutions and testing conditions that meet the real ones, while false criteria determine the quality and relevance of project. Ukraine is ready to share all the lessons learned and battlefield experience with our partners. Ukraine is learning by doing, and we can share our expertise with you to make your development process faster and easier, especially in the processes of digitalization and drone industry. The experience must be harnessed and scaled. Joint R&D initiatives, collaborative ventures, and joint procurement efforts, their governments, private sector, scientists, and military personnel communicate effectively are essential. Let's establish a mutually beneficial solid bridge between Europe and Kiev. Regular industry visits, workshops, and roadshows should become part of our routine collaboration. Ukraine's victory and safety in Europe require active collaboration and knowledge exchange with our partners. By sharing our experiences, we can accelerate the pace of our technological development. Together, let us strengthen our partnership and establish lasting security through technological superiority. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for explaining those three product lines and for calling for tighter collaboration between your imaginative digital warriors and those in other countries. I'm moved to ask eventually our friend from the DIU to assess at speed whether the space AI battle management system that I think the Pentagon uses borrows from any of these techniques at all. We'll now move to Q&A. Remember your two-step process of putting your badge on the slide of your system and pressing the button. The green light will turn on. That means I can see your name. When I call you, the red light goes on to show that it's a hot mic. So I'll take 4 or 5 questions at the beginning and then come back to the panel. Before I move to the first, I might just lodge one of mine in advance for General Barry, which is to ask him when he thinks it might be possible to have AGI-enabled robotics actually in the field able to train. I know that in the commercial sector already, there are AI-enabled robots who are able to, in real time, train their understanding of difficult terrain, whether it be deserts, woods, or mountains, and be able to literally feel their way through a complex environment. And that technology is available to constructing firms probably within about 18 months, and it would be intriguing to learn if you thought there was any timescale for them to be incorporated into the armed forces. And with that, I've gained 2 more questions. So Pavel Fischer first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a question to General Berry. You spoke about lessons learned from Ukraine battlefield. Could you just be more concrete and give some examples of something that you are inspired by while observing the battlefield and the needs of good training for soldiers? Thank you.
And now Russell Driggers.
Good morning. Thank you. Appreciate the comments, and I'm curious if you could comment on what we're seeing in terms of, this is mostly for DIU, sir, on 5G and the promise that capabilities like network slicing, edge computing, to be able to bring that kind of capability to the battlefield. And then right now we're kind of dependent on industry to provide the transmitters. Is there a move to continue to bring them along with us downrange whenever we would go into a potential fight, or do we have that kit ourselves? I'm interested in learning a little bit more on your perspective on what kind of opportunities that provides. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Michaels.
Hello, thank you. A question for Minister Chernow-Harenko. Could you talk a bit more about the 45-day development cycle? Do you think you can shorten that? And how does that work? And for General Bhutto, when you hear a 45-day development cycle, living within the Pentagon, does that set your head spinning? Thank you.
And before we turn back to the panel, Bastian Giegerick.
Thank you, John. And it actually follows on directly from the previous question, because for the Deputy Minister from Ukraine, I also wanted to ask you a bit more about that innovation cycle and the speed of it, and how you make the private sector and the government parts work together. This seems to have been a recurring theme here, that people struggle to speed up that collaboration. So what have you done that you would think all others should be doing as well to achieve that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn first to the Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine, who will answer, I think, these questions in Ukrainian, but we'll have a sequential translation. So there were 2 for you, Minister, one on the 45-day cycle and one on the collaboration between the public and private sector. Over to you.
Question. It's good. We're working on now. And this collaboration, we in Ukraine speed up its innovation cycle, will have technological superiority over enemy. Nowadays, we are dividing all innovations on several types. One of them are step-by-step innovations, which are about current modernizations and solutions. For example, that's a change of drones frequencies, improvement of already existing technologies, solutions in this cycle and shorten this cycle between development to deployment and to our industry. But we do understand that there are also other types of our innovations. And shifting towards the second question, what government could do in this context? In this context, our government is keeping up with best practices already existing in the world when the state has to communicate with its industry by requests, by clear tasks and objectives, and therefore we are trying to arrange our activity, and our government will clear requests for our defense industries. We have a great example in army of drones. We know that Ukrainians are quite successful in terms of the drone industry, and we do understand that we have the technological place. We are talking about innovation systems. We are talking about autonomous targeting of our drones via artificial intelligence. We are talking about speedful and quick detection of targets. And nowadays in Ukraine, we have broadcasting and online videos from thousands of UAVs and drones, and we have to get all this information, gather it, and process this information. We know that the world is focused towards data-based economies. Data is a new goal of our world. That's a new benchmark towards which all countries are moving. We could observe it in public sphere, in news, in information technologies, and in this context, the AI is extremely great brand. And as I have already told, we have a platform which is focused to transform the data, the pictures and broadcasts from our UAVs into analyzed and ready-to-use data to give a request for targeting and aiming and engagement. And all these lines of efforts will be about innovative technologies with which our state is beginning. In order to receive innovation system of new generation, we have to give our defense industries and our partners' defense industries different requests. We know that in the framework of our Stein Club, there is drone coalition, and the drone coalition is an active tool for dialogue with the defense industries of our allies. And recently we have opened standards for autonomous thermal drones. And that's a good example that on the level of cooperation with our partners, framework of UDCG, we are already assigning tasks for industries of Ukraine, of our partners, and these tasks are already proper tasks. And to conclude, I would like to say that asymmetrical technology of superiority in Ukraine show our service member using Delta system of environment attract highly expensive Russian factory named Fancy, that's $15 million. And he tracked the life cycle of this method. He mapped it via quite cheap UAV, and he engaged it with this cheap UAV by $1,000 and destroyed this system. That's a great example of how cheap but technological solutions may destroy expensive weaponry of our enemy. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Quick comment on the first question about artificial intelligence, and it could equally quite be stated for quantum. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is an umbrella term. It includes many technologies, computer vision, large language models, anyways, but not all those technologies are mature. And so the maturity of the technology really governs what you can do. So self-driving cars are ready for a commercial market, but we drive self-driving cars in a highly structured environment. Out in the remote wilderness or the desert is not structured, and so we have to be certain to bring technologies in that are mature and ready for application tactically. On the matter of Ukrainian lessons in the battlefield and the innovation, it's natural that the most innovative are people who are normally in a crisis because you're highly focused, and I think that the emergence of the small unmanned aerial systems, drones, if you will, in Ukraine at scale is a tremendous innovation, and will probably be benefiting all of Europe in the long run. On 5G, 5G has a tremendous promise, but it's not moving as fast as other proliferated satellite-based communications capabilities. You could do an enormous amount of edge compute using proliferated satellite constellations like Starlink, but you also have the ability to transmit from low Earth orbit to the Earth, 10 milliseconds. And also, you can distribute this information rather rapidly. So for the warfighter, we want decisional advantage, and we want increased situational awareness. Both of those require broadband capabilities that currently will exceed what the 5G market. On the 45-day challenge, I will say that there's more. Our challenge is really bureaucracy, and I love the paper army reference from our friends in Ukraine, because it's real, and we have to fight the paper army in all of our militaries. But I will remind you that the stealth fighter went from initial concept to initial capability in under 3 years. The Starship that you see fly, which is a developing capability in Texas, the company is iterating between every flight. So they collect tremendous amounts of data, they improve software, they improve hardware, and this is the type of culture, innovation culture, that we want to see flourish in across our whole defense enterprise and commercial enterprise. So I'll throw a prop to one of the sponsors, Lockheed Martin. They did not pay me to say this, but the innovations of Lockheed were largely from one man, Kelly Johnson, who was the Elon Musk of his era. And so the real question is, where are our Kelly Johnsons? Where are our Elon Musk? Where are the great thinkers and innovators who we need to have applying themselves to problems that we have in our national security base? And that's one of the missions of DIU. And we know that talent's not always going to be on the US continent. It's going to be in Europe, it'll be in Ukraine, and we need to find those people and help them be successful.
Chris Barry.
So we'll go to the second question first. What have we learned from Ukraine in detail? So of course, loads. Constants and accelerants of combat. So when you think of constants, it is scale, logistics at scale, firepower at scale, mobilization at scale, the synchronization of effects in order to break down the enemy position. But then there are also accelerants, aren't there? The use of artificial intelligence for targeting, the use of first-person view drone, the use of the importance of space, for example. But let me just give you two really simply understood examples. So the first one is digging. The Ukraine military have this great video that essentially says your spade is your friend, because when you stop, you dig. And of course, that was familiar to all of us who served for the armies that we joined. Even though we had not been, or the units we joined had not been under shell fire, it was in our muscle memory that when you stopped, you dug a hole. And that has gone. And we have to bring that back. It is a very low-tech thing, but it is vital that we protect ourselves from shellfire. But then there are also accelerants, and let's go to first-person view drone. So first-person view drone is a battlefield technology of great effect, but how to use it? And again, from our partners, we have learned that the competency to fly it can be found on, by people using computer games. So the ability to be very good at this and not feel motion sickness and not feel and be able to act at the speed that these things fly at is a discrete competency that you would spend an awful long time training, but far better to pick the people who are really good at it. And I think that kind of leads on to the second question about artificial or the use of AGI robots. So we in the British Army a couple of years ago, we had a robot dog called Bruno, and this bloody thing came out every time we were hosting visitors as an example of how we were learning. But the thing wasn't good, right? It was clunky, it couldn't do with stairs, it got in the way, it fell over, and it is not competency. It's not useful, it's not capability, it's just kit. So when we think about how we are going to onboard kit, the first thing is we have to think about what are the competencies that are required, rather than what is the kit that we're going to train against. And if you think of first-person view drone, if you're going to learn to use that, you will need a simulator, of course, to decide who's good at it, and you can get lots and lots of reps and sets of that. But you also need a very cheap live variant to be able to fly around and understand what wind does to it, what geometry does, what it looks like, what it feels like, to be able to do that in the life. But that doesn't need to be the final thing, does it? It's because you're just developing a competency, and there's nothing stops us doing that right now, and we have to do that. So we have to understand what those competencies are. And then on terms of capability, there's got to be really clear, what are we going to train, how are we going to train this thing? So is it going to be done in a simulator? In which case, that's fine, but let's understand the disbenefits of that. And when we think of some of the lethality of these things, you probably don't want it flying around Senalaga training area. Get it wrong, and it hits the school. You know, that's bad for our license to operate. And we have a license to operate. We have got to understand that. There is law, there is policy, there is social convention, that there is just the reality of trying to build an army in a peacetime world. And we could cry in our Pilsner all day long about this, but it cannot be a reason not to do something now. So we've got to grow that license to operate. We've got to grow it with the civil sector and with industry, and industry can help us do that, such that we get to a position where we are properly training as we would fight. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'd go to another round of questions, but there aren't any on my list, so I will ask three, as maybe one or two more people join the queue. Suddenly three have, so I've alerted people well. But since I started, as they say in UK Mastermind, I'll finish. You mentioned ITAR, General, and of course there was a bit of a breakthrough just in the last few months with an agreement for the so-called second pillar of AUKUS, that second pillar having at least 8 exquisite technologies that require cooperation between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States, quantum, cyber, undersea capabilities and the rest. But that was really hard to get with 2 other Five Eyes members. What confidence do you have that you can advance well with those who aren't already, at least in the Five Eyes? And to General Barry, we heard from Microsoft about the importance of having technology companies, operate in wartime. I think there are more than 11 technology companies operating in Ukraine now, including, for example, Anduril, that in real time is updating the software of drones. How do you incorporate technology companies perhaps in advance in your planning? And finally, for the Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister, Elon Musk was mentioned earlier. He was on the telephone with President Trump-elect yesterday with your president. I understand that he said he would let Ukraine use Starlink. Would he let Ukraine use Starlink for all operations anywhere on Russian territory, or only in a very confined manner? So maybe I'll ask General Barry, General Bulow, General Barry, and the Ukrainian Defense Minister to answer on Starlink. Go ahead.
So on the first matter, it's interesting that if I can write a contract with a commercial company and award it in under 45 days. If, however, I want to collaborate with a partner, especially an alliance, and then try to share money to work with that company, it could take 2 to 3 years. And it's largely because we have conventions that require an international or a bilateral understanding of how we're going to handle the technology, who's going to test it, how we're going to, all these caveats, which apply in a centrally managed, autocratic industrial base, really, which the way that we buy things is that way. In the free market economy, you're not constrained by that. So first is what we have to do is use all the instruments available to us and work with the commercial sector in ways that are more natural, and not start with going to the table to write agreements. Because really every partner could go and buy a commercial capability and start using it all together without having to precede it with a bunch of agreements. I would say I want to go back to the policy side, because I think this is really, really important, that the policy must be agile, and we must bring the policymakers in early when we're innovating. And this is very important, because we could actually innovate and deliver a capability for which it's impossible to use because we either have a policy or we may have a treaty that prevents it. So that's very important. I think AUKUS is a good start, and that process must continue, because ultimately, on Pillar 1, we're talking about how we share exquisite things. And exquisite is still a very important part of the portfolio. It's not all commercial, right? We have to have everything. But I do think that ITAR, it's in our best interest, even if we had peacetime, we really need our commercial companies need to be competitive, more competitive in a global environment, and it's to our mutual benefit to create an environment where they can do that. So.
General Barry?
Thank you. So we are, of course, privileged to get all of this enormous learning from our dear friends in the partner nation. But we wouldn't wish it to be that way. We would want to be in a world where Ukraine has prevailed and we are building capability to be able to deter further Russian aggression. And you think, how do you do that absent a conflict to learn from? And it is, I'm afraid, back to this idea of creating a training as a surrogate for warfare, a battle gym, ever more important in this era of accelerated human progress, where our capability is going to have to face the threat. And so what are the constituent parts of that battle gym? Well, first of all, you need competent people to be able to enter the box. You know, if they're not able to understand how to prosecute the 21st century command arms battle, then you're not going to learn good lessons from it. And secondly, once they're in that box, they've got to be fighting an aggressive thinking enemy that's representing the threat and is trying to take us down, not just sitting dumbly on a position waiting for the final attack, but across all of the domains, trying to destroy our ability to achieve our plan. And then thirdly, it's got to be measurable. We've got to be able to have a series of MOPs and MOs that are consistent with the technology. And I kind of remind you all, how did we used to measure an ambush? Well, we used to measure an ambush through noise. So we'd hear everybody firing together and we'd say, good ambush. But not true. Not true if you've not hit anything. You know, so when we think about how we set up our training, we've got to think, what is the data points that we're going to draw from this that allow industry to be able to say, okay, that worked. What's the next requirement? What's the next evolution of that? And I think this requirement to build something that we're all involved in across NATO is super important. And I think at the moment, that is something that we will need to attend to. As to the date by which we could bring this stuff into core, then, I mean, tomorrow, isn't it? And it's 27. I mean, it's really, really fast, the pressing need upon us. And we mustn't make perfection the enemy of progress. So if we have to use a simulation to start with, if we wish it to be that way, we'd want to be able to train as we fight. But if we can't, then let's do something instead to develop the competencies in anticipation of a greater license to operate to do these things in the life.
Thank you. Deputy Minister Katerina, so can you use Starlink as you like, or would you wish to be able to use Starlink in more different and various ways?
Should tell that indeed how we are using them. I would like to recall that Russians violated internationally recognized borders and invaded Ukraine. It was to make all civilized world, all engineers, all manufacturers of modern technologies, of technologies which are being used in civilian domain to support Ukraine and are aiming to protect democratic values and values shared by us and our allies, have to do everything in order to provide Ukraine with technological superiority. There are companies which are already providing us with technological superiority are going to expand this capability because we are waging a just war and allies and the whole civilized world is on our side. Is Ukrainian getting prepared to have better technological development, including communication development? We are permanently working with this axis. We are not going to complete it tomorrow, but the whole Ministry of Defense and other ministries and the government team is working over capabilities to continue technological advantage development and capabilities to do it together with our partners. Toward development of relations with technological companies, we think that here we have to have a strategy. We are sharing requests to improve products of different companies, including companies from defense industries. Our military are taking part in intellectual and good contact with other partners in order to improve these technologies. We know that Ukraine is the biggest training field nowadays, unfortunately, because that's the biggest land warfare on the continent. But from the other side, that's a great opportunity for our partners to get this feedback, how they should develop and towards which kind of efforts they should work. Nowadays, the tank column of approximately 15 tanks may be stopped by platoon, company, battalion, or UAV operators, which means that we are using small asymmetric way to stop the column of heavy machinery. Is this a signal for Western industry to view this warfare as the warfare of the future in another way? Is it a signal for different companies and Western companies to figure out and sort out other solutions in order to develop their defense lines and be ready to defend in their countries? Ukrainians as well are working with communications, and we are sharing information in this domain as well with our partners in the future. We are going to look for solutions. Digital team of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine is doing everything possible to and launch a special project with our partners to see all requests and requirements quickly. Thank you.
So I've got a quintet of people now on my list. I'll ask them to make their point or ask their question and then have a final round with the panel. First, from the ISS, Tom Waldwin.
Thanks, John. A question each for the two generals. General Buto, does the DIU have any, if they see, for example, if you see a product in a Romanian or a Belgian company that you want, do you have any restrictions in terms of where you can go and where you can get it from? And then General Barry, I think already one of the themes of the summit is speed and doing things a lot more quickly than has been the case. And I thought it was very interesting what you were saying about muscle memory and the need for training to adapt. Can you say a bit about how quickly you can implement these changes so that training becomes a lot more relevant and realistic? Thank you.
And from Austria, Associate Fellow Vice S, Franz Stefan Gaddi.
Thank you, John. This is for Major General Barry as well. Sir, do you expect certain emerging technological capabilities down the road over the next couple of years supporting the operational deployment of autonomous systems to be able to compensate for the lack of mass in NATO ground forces, or do you merely see a shift in terms of the ratio of combat support, combat support and combat service support elements within land forces in NATO? Thank you.
Jeff Bilwunke.
Thank you, John. I wanted to pick up on the conversation in relation to artificial intelligence, and maybe first an observation, which is that AI, of course, has been with us for a long time, I guess over 70 years, at least since the Turing test, one might say, but it does feel still that we are in a new era of AI, and I think it is the advent of generative AI applications such as, say, ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, to name just a couple, that have really changed the conversation. So I was curious to hear from any of the panelists in relation to consideration of how AI, Gen AI, can be used in the context of defense. Apart from examples like targeting, for instance, there's a lot that could be done to create efficiencies in how people think, how people work, including in the context of defense. I'm curious about that. And second, I suppose, what can be done by the private sector to support that broad diffusion or adoption of Gen AI? I mean, as a company, Microsoft has committed, we hope ambitiously, to train literally millions of people for free over the coming years on the use of Gen AI. We actually have content we can make available to anyone in this audience, for example, over LinkedIn, if that's of interest. And I would invite, in fact, anybody in the room to reach out to me if you would like to discuss more what we might do as a company to support training of officials and agencies across the region. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a lot of heads going up and down, so you might get a few calls. Thank you for that offer. Tom Beckett.
Thank you. And perhaps this has been covered, but it's for both of the generals, but starting with General Barry. The British Chief of the General Staff has said that he intends to treble lethality over the next few years of the in-place army that he's got. How's he going to do that? And for the DIU General Buto, is it possible?
Ben Schreier.
Thank you, John. My question is for the Deputy Minister. So the technology sharing from the enemy's perspective. What is your assessment about Russia's capacity to introduce and innovate much faster? Are they getting better? And do you see any indication of them getting help from China, Iran, or any other entities in doing so?
Thank you very much. James Hackett.
Take that off. Thank you, John. General Barry spoke about, I think, the lack of training areas. I mean, how is digitalization changing training effectiveness, improving combat effectiveness, not just in the UK, but across allies and partners too, in terms of interoperability? I mean, this stuff's been going for quite a while. Combined Arms Tactical Trainer started in the 1990s. You know, it's been around for some years now, but what practical difference is it really making? And are your processes flexible enough to be able to generate feedback loops, as the Deputy Minister was talking about, by learning from the digital natives that are currently in service, to be able to improve and adapt at the pace that you require in terms of the digitalization of training? And for General Buto, you mentioned declassification. I think it was need to design and build to the lowest classification, not declassification, sorry. But how do you take the Pentagon bureaucracy and the military bureaucracy with you on that, given that there's a tendency to overclassify? You know, can you do that again at the speed that's required, given it's a really big cultural shift? Thanks.
Thanks. So General Bulow first, then the Deputy Minister from Ukraine, and I'll have General Barry conclude.
Sure. Okay. On the first question, are we looking amongst European partners, especially in Eastern Europe, Romania, Czech Republic, and actually, yes. Are there constraints? No. The biggest constraint or restriction is just we don't have people, boots on the ground, Army term, in these places yet. But we're working on this, and we want to find the best talent to really solve problems. I will say that before Russia invaded Ukraine, we awarded a prize challenge to a software engineer and company in Ukraine, which was really exciting. And so we have the mechanisms to do that, and we're not alone. I think this is an excellent area for us to do more partnerships with NATO, and you'll see more of that, especially with the emergence of the NATO Innovation Fund. For emerging tech, and I think that the rate of adoption can be very quick. I think it's important if you're in acquisition or if you're in the science and technology arena, you must understand that a warfighter would rather have a capability that delivers 60, 80% capability than 0%. So the acquisition process wants to deliver 100% capability every time, and therefore it takes a long time to deliver 100%. So we would rather have capabilities off the shelf that give us that asymmetric edge, and they get improved over time with input from the warfighter, which is very important. We call that the lean methodology, taking input from the warfighter. We have a culture where we take input from people who are the farthest removed from the tactical edge, and that's something we have to get over. On the matter of artificial intelligence, I think it's, yes, we've done AI for a long time, but we've done it in large data centers and fixed locations they're not mobile or transportable. And I think the recent advances are really the miniaturization of the compute technology, and also our ability to employ it in situ or remotely in areas where we need it. So the one thing we cannot choose to change is physics, and the length over which we move data is constrained by the speed of light. So taking information in the tactical environment and processing it and redistributing it in real time, that's where we need to be. And so the more cognizant our warfighters, not our command and control centers, our warfighters need to have the information advantage, and they need to be able to react in that. And we have to have resilient communications architectures that allow for that to continue, regardless of whatever mischief our adversaries are creating. So the way we're doing that is through hybridization. Everyone has a different smartphone terminal in their pocket, but we all share a common architecture. I arrived in Europe on Sunday, and I didn't have to do anything special to my phone to start communicating and doing very advanced things on that smartphone. So we need the same thing with our terminals that we have across all domains in the military sphere, and our network has to be self-healing and resilient, and the commercial sector really knows how to do this. So it's under attack from cyber every day. Microsoft, actually, we have a partnership with Microsoft. We did early on in the Ukraine fight, where we helped to run advanced analytics on their information enterprise to do battle damage assessment in a near real-time basis with all the commercial sensor capabilities. So this is live. It can run live, and anybody could look at it which I think is really important. On the classification issue, we would be at a disadvantage in terms of having the global community supporting this effort if all the information was classified and we couldn't share the satellite imagery and many of the things that were collected commercially at the beginning of this fight. But I will say that in order to go to production at scale, we need well-defined requirements. Those requirements are often classified. In order to address some of the most immediate needs for the warfighter, those don't need to be classified at the highest level. And we need to keep that information at the lowest level. We have to be resistant to solving NATO secret or lower classification problems at the highest classifications of our defense departments, because what we do is we are denying capability to the warfighter, and the hardest declassification is to go from CUI, confidential, to unclassified. So you will never get there because the people who have to declassify, it's enormous risk for them. But I think this is really important. I'll turn it over. I know there was another question, but it feeds off of my companion's response.
Thanks very much. Well, perhaps to the Deputy Minister of Ukraine for those two specific questions, what is your assessment as to how quickly Russia is innovating at war on digital issues? And secondly, what support do you detect in the technological realm that Russia might be getting from China, Iran, or North Korea?
Development of the Russian Federation in terms of their cooperation with their allies, what impact on the battlefield? For online study, these are my favorite questions. I thank you for this question. So first of all, in terms of technological progress of the Russian Federation, I would like to tell that taking into account open source intelligence, you have to understand that innovation cycle of the Russians are not ended on Ukrainians. If you will take a look on plans of the Russian Federation, you will see that they have a united technology plan with secured communication assets, and that's a huge comprehensive plan for different types of warfare in different domains. That's a cyber domain, that's potential space domain, and that's a marker that if we are talking about practical innovational successes of Russian Federation, we have this military term to exploit the success. I should say that Russians are exploiting success. They are countering our drones, countering our electronic warfare. They are delivering North Korean ammunition to the Russian Federation and other technological assets which are being used by them. But I would like to underscore one more time that technological progress plan of the Russian Federation are far above the framework of the warfare with Ukraine. And I think that you are also permanently thinking about if that we have to take measures and try to predict what the enemy is planning for us. Because the enemy has already planned its coalition, and we will see. In terms of digital transformation on the big battlefield, I think, and my team do believe that the transformations should be done via digitalization. We see now that on numerous trainings with NATO, with Delta system, our situational awareness system is a great giant digital environment for us and our allies for military operations. We are able to get data from our partners. For example, we need to plan our engagement assets, we need to compare results of their engagement, and all of this is being done via shortening the time period, because you are receiving the intel data when you are engaging with the target, and all these processes are moving towards potential digitalization. And digital systems will play a huge role of a united environment for command control over all military operations, in particular due to partnership with our allies. In terms of the third question of online training, numerous processes might be distance, and we have online module in our app Army Plus, and now our military people are studying on the battlefield via this application. They have all lessons learned from this warfare there. We are providing module by module in this app, so you have a unique opportunity to get knowledge, to get some tips how to do one or another action. And in this way, we are fighting for shortening the starting cycle and making it more efficient at the same time. And I should tell that it is important not only in the context of development of military people, but also in terms of development of reserve, because Ukrainian warfare showed that ready and our reservists should be trained as well, should be prepared for potential task assignments. Therefore, here we have to work not only with the education of our military people and professional army, but also with training of our reservists, because it is the most important line of efforts which we do have now. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much. General Barry.
So I'm going to try and link all these questions together, and I'm going to start with General Tom, and if the other questioners had ranks, forgive me, I don't new to this game. So General Tom, in the 1980s there was this film, Crocodile Dundee, and this Australian bushranger arrives in New York, and he's held up by a man with a knife, and he pulls out a bigger knife, and he says, call that a knife. And when your question about trebling lethality, it really boils down to that. We want every bit of our army to have a bigger knife than our adversary. And that is possible, but we have to think, and this is to sort of France's question, you know, does autonomy help us? Because it is not just as simple as that, is it? It's about sensor, decider, effector, sustainer. And does technology allow us to forget about mass? Well, no, it doesn't. But it does allow us to start thinking about it a little bit more differently. And if we just consider the problem of a battle group, so a battle group holding ground has to have its arcs interlocking. It doesn't matter how far it can see, it's got to be able to shoot. And if your weapon systems interlock at 2.5K, which roughly they do at the moment, then that's the piece of ground you can hold. But if you can equip that battle group with both the sensor and the effector, to be able to interlock at a greater range with confidence, then you start to be able to disperse. And if you start to be able to disperse, then you start to have a lower signature. And if you have a lower signature, you're harder to acquire. And if you have then an artificial intelligence that allows you to link that sensor to the effector in the most efficient manner possible, then your sustainment footprint becomes less. So you need less fuel and you need less munitions. And if you have that, then your signature further back then becomes easier to hide and harder to acquire and harder to kill. And that's the game we're in, really. It is about trying to get those benefits faster than our opponent. And when we think about Tom's question about how you onboard that equipment, well, the British Army has just changed its training methodology into a thing called Land Training System. And what it thinks about is the building blocks of an army. And at the moment, we define about 444 different building blocks of our army, from a corps headquarters to an armoured squadron, from a light aid detachment to a field hospital. And essentially, that is a team of skills. And we could take this first table here, sirs. You all bring competencies to the party. There is something you will need to have before you're able to work as a team. And that we wish to give you either in our schools, but perhaps recruited directly from the civilian sector in a more complicated capability. But then we still need to train that table. so that it's able to deliver something greater than the sum of its parts. And this is the most important part of our training methodology. This training of these building blocks in protected time with the lessons and with the technology that they're going to use in a way that they become expert at it. Because when they do, that table can then begin to combine with all the other tables to create something that is constantly being refreshed. And if we're training that table every year, then we can pace technology and we can pace lessons and we can pace what we learn from our training and from combat. And then that takes us, I think, to Jeff's question to James's question about digitization. So that methodology works if you are able to have the understanding of where you're strong and where you're weak, and to be able to assure that competency against a series of MOPs and MOs. And we have at the beginnings of this in a program we've done with a Swedish firm called Mimir. Now Mimir was the the Norse god of wisdom. The other gods didn't like him. They cut his head off. They carried it around in a bag. And this doesn't take away from the fact that training is a command-led responsibility. But if it is informed by the wisdom of a database that's constantly being improved, then we move from a world where our training is sort of cyclical, where you train to a competency and drop, and then train and drop, to one that is progressive. And that is essential in this era of accelerated human progress, because the world will not keep up with a model that we used to have. And that, finally, I think, takes us to Jeff's question about AI. So AI can help us there, hugely. But it's not the only place that it can help us, because you think of all of these other processes of a paper army that prevent us moving resource into the right place. I mean, for example, we pay out an awful lot of money in hearing loss claims, not because people have necessarily lost their hearing as a result of being in the army, although some clearly have, but because we cannot prove that we gave them the training. Now think of a world where we're able to be absolutely clear what competencies we've delivered and how that protects our license to operate, and then think of the other processes that you could apply that certainty to, and then you start to be able to get to a position where you're getting the most out of your resource to be able to build combat power. And I think that is as much the challenge of the current period as anything else. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much, and perhaps we'll be able to insert a footnote on page 87 to say that it's, of course, important that training is progressive rather than cyclical. So thank you for that thought. I had two thoughts from this session, and then we'll move to an enthusiastic thank you. It is, I think, quite remarkable that over the last 2 years, Western countries have worried what form of activity would make them perceived to be co-combatants in Ukraine, and therefore NATO or its members being implicitly or legally engaged. And yet there has been no evident concern as to whether the more than 11 Western technology companies that are operating in Ukraine are themselves co-combatants, not least because they're actually in the field and on Ukrainian soil, co-located with Ukrainian soldiers, updating their technological capacities. And it is remarkable to me that that question hasn't been asked a little bit more overtly. And there is a corollary to that question, which is while we very rightly, as General Barry said, know that we operate in the West within certain legal and societal frameworks, isn't it interesting and remarkable that technology companies are being prosecuted in law for having facilitated perhaps online hate? When will come the day when an international court prosecutes a Western technology company whose AI tool might have led to the killing of some civilians when a country is going for a high-value target? So the modernization of international law against this high-tech background is, I think, an urgent necessity. And if there's anything that moves slower than defense procurement, it's the modernization of international law. But many thanks to our three speakers, and especially the Deputy Minister of Ukraine for delivering us that thought from the field. Will you join me in thanking all three of them and then proceed to lunch?